So I want to tell you about a dentist. Let's call him David. Now, David is the guy that other dentists look at and say he's nailed it. Thriving practice, waiting list of patients, highly trained team. But at home, he's got the big house, the fancy European holidays, kids in private schools. So if you saw him at a conference, you'd assume he was the one who had options. But over dinner one night, David told me something that stopped me. He couldn't cut back even one shift a week without the whole system wobbling. The practice needed him. The lifestyle needed him. And somewhere deep down, he wasn't sure who he'd be if he wasn't Dr. So-and-so. It's why people respected him. It's what he was known for. And that's when I realized David wasn't free. He was wearing the golden handcuffs. And before you think this is just a dentist thing, let me give you a different example. Michael Jordan, the most celebrated basketball player in history, retired in '93 at the absolute peak of his career. He'd won 3 championships, had global fame, more money than he could spend, and he walked away. At least that was the original plan. He tried professional baseball, he tried golf, but nothing really matched the identity he'd built as Michael Jordan, the basketball player. And within 2 years, he was back on the court. He came back again in his late 30s to play for the Washington Wizards. Now, the part that most people miss is that even when he was financially, free and left the NBA for good, Michael Jordan wasn't exactly done. He kept playing exhibition games, running endorsement circuits, and trying to protect the Jordan brand. And that comeback drew plenty of criticism. Commentators said he should have just retired the first time, that he risked tarnishing his legacy. But the pull of the role, the image, the expectations, it was just way too strong. Jordan was way past financially free, but in many ways he was still wearing a softer kind of golden handcuff. And that's the thing. Golden handcuffs aren't always about needing the money. They can be about the lifestyle, the image, and the identity that makes stepping away feel impossible. So why are they hard to see? The thing about golden handcuffs is they feel good. They're shiny, they're comfortable, maybe even flattering. You know people look over and admire them. And mostly you can convince yourself they're not even there. For dentists, it often starts innocently. You finally hit a point where the business is throwing off a healthy surplus. You reward yourself. Bigger house, upgrade car, book that dream trip. It's only fair after all those years of study and long hours. But slowly those rewards stop feeling like rewards and they start feeling like non-negotiables. Your lifestyle rises to match your income and the bar keeps moving. There's definitely research to back this up. Finder's data shows that 1 in 3 high-income Australians live paycheck to paycheck, despite earning more than double the median wage. And not because they're reckless, but because fixed commitments, mortgages, school fees, insurances, travel, they quietly expand until there's not much left over. And if you own a practice, the stakes are even higher because you've got the business commitments and the lifestyle ones. If you stop pumping the business, then the wheels of your entire life can come off. It's no question it's a big burden to carry. So let's talk about the 3 common traps. Trap number 1 is the lifestyle creep that locks you in. So once your lifestyle baseline shifts, any thought of pulling back income feels like failure. I once worked with a dentist, I'll call him Jerry. And when he bought his first practice, he and his family lived very modestly. Small house, 1 car, no debt beyond the mortgage. But within 5 years, the business was humming and so was the lifestyle. They'd upgraded to a bigger home with a pool. They'd bought a ski apartment. They put their 2 kids in elite schools, and they took business class flights everywhere. So the problem was those upgrades became the minimum acceptable standard. And by the time James considered cutting back his clinical days, the numbers just didn't work without dismantling that lifestyle. And there was literally no universe that Jerry felt he could ever explain that to his wife. Trap number 2, your money is tied to you. So for many practice owners, 70 to 80% of their net worth is tied up in the practice, the building, or a small set of familiar investments. So on paper, it can look impressive. But when you want to step back, those assets don't turn into income easily, and sometimes not at the value you assumed. Karen owned her own building and had equity in her practice, a couple of residential properties she rented out. So on paper, she was worth millions. But when she tried to step back, she quickly learned that her assets just weren't converting into usable income. She didn't want to sell the clinic building because that meant losing the rent from her own practice. The residential properties were just not even breaking even, and the practice val came in at 20% lower than she assumed. She realized her wealth was trapped inside structures that only worked if she kept working. Trap number 3 is mistaking activity for growth. This one is super subtle. There are a lot of dentists who do invest outside their practice, but they pick low maintenance, low yield options, like a single commercial property or a term deposit or a managed fund they never check on. It feels safe, but over time, these may or may not perform for you, and the result is the same. You're dependent on the practice for far longer than you planned. Michael was really proud to tell me that he'd been investing for years. And when we looked closer at his portfolio, we saw that there was a single underperforming commercial property, a handful of blue chip shares, and a term deposit he'd rolled over for a decade. None of them were bad in isolation, but together they were generating a return that barely kept pace with inflation after tax. Michael thought he'd been building a safety net, but in reality, he'd built a very expensive holding pattern. Now, the fear that no one talks about, the real fear isn't that I won't make enough money. It's that I'll wake up one day and realize that my entire life only works if I keep doing exactly what I'm doing now. One dentist I know planned to sell at 60. The market softened, valuations shifted, and the offers she got were hundreds of thousands less than she expected. She kept working another 5 years, not because she wanted to, but because the numbers forced her to. And then there's Louise. She told me she knew she was in the golden handcuffs the day she couldn't say yes to a friend's invitation to hike in Nepal for a month. It wasn't the cost of the trip, she could definitely afford that. It was the time away from patients, the potential hit to production, the impact on cash flow that made it impossible. She said, that's when I realized I'd built a life that looked free, but wasn't. So what is the other side? What does freedom look like? Freedom isn't one fixed picture. It doesn't always mean selling the practice and walking away. I've seen dentists get there in dozens of different ways, and the right version is the one that fits your values, your goals, and your appetite for change. So let me give you some examples. Sarah still owns part of her practice. She didn't sell out completely. She wanted to take some chips off the table. Years earlier, she'd sold a share to a partner and invested those into some income-producing assets outside of dentistry. That extra income meant she could cut back her clinical hours without worrying about the bills. Now she currently works 2 days a week. She sees her favourite patients. She earns pretty well from the business and from her investments. But she also spends months overseas every year, confident that her practice isn't going to collapse without her constant presence. Other dentists I've worked with have done it differently. Some have kept their whole practice, but restructured their team so that they only work on high-value procedures they enjoy. Others have built a portfolio outside of dentistry big enough to cover their lifestyle so the practice income is simply a bonus. And a few have stepped away from the chair entirely, but kept an ownership stake, drawing passive income while focusing on other ventures. The point is, freedom is the ability to work because you want to, not because you have to. And there are many doors that will lead you there. So let's talk about how you might loosen those golden cuffs. Step 1, get clear on your enough number. Most dentists never stop to define this. Instead, they just expand to fill the space. So you've got to be ruthless. What do you actually need to live the life you want? You might find you're chasing things you don't even care about. So definitely go back and listen to episode 4 if you want to go deeper on this. But it may involve having some tough questions. Step 2, build the other tracks early. Your practice income is just one track. The others, building capital, creating leverage, income-producing investments, they're what let you choose when and how you work. This is the 3-part wealth game in action. Without it, the cuffs only tighten. And if you mindfully start accumulating assets that generate strong, predictable cash flow sooner, then you create the ultimate insurance policy. Or said in another way, you don't have to work the traditional 40-plus year career or depend on a high practice sale. We spoke about this at length in episode 6, so if you missed it, please go back, it's worth watching. Step 3 is shift from easy investments to effective ones. So if you've been defaulting to low yield, low effort investments, maybe it's time to rethink. Safety isn't just about avoiding risk. It's about making sure your money is actually working for you. Because here's the problem. There's a whole world of alternative investment strategies out there that can fast track your ability to achieve financial security sooner. But you won't hear about most of them through the channels that you've been taught to trust. Traditional financial planners, private bankers, or the glossy brochures from your institution. Why? The reason is because it's not in their interest to educate you beyond their product shelf. So they make their money by keeping you invested in their models. So what that means is usually publicly listed markets, managed funds, or products they can charge an ongoing fee to manage. And the more you know, the more you might question that model. And that is the last thing they want. They don't want you building deep investment knowledge, because once you understand the full menu of opportunities, you are far less likely to simply hand them the keys and walk away. Their business is built on you abdicating investment decisions to them. That's what they get paid for. Your freedom is built on the opposite, or becoming an informed, active steward of your capital so you can choose the strategies that serve your goals and not theirs. And it's not just planners and bankers. The property industry is full of hidden commissions and backroom deals. I've seen the investment specialists pocket tens of thousands in undeclared kickbacks from developers who steer a client into a particular property. It can be 3 to 8% of the purchase price, paid quietly, without the buyer even knowing. That means the recommendation isn't always about what's best for you. Sometimes it's about what pays the most. And if you're not aware of those incentives, you're playing a game where the other side is holding all the cards and they're not telling you the rules. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. In the next episode, I'm going to dig a bit deeper into what it actually takes to step outside the mainstream model, and how to spot a real opportunity, how to vet it, how to avoid the traps that can undo years of hard work. So if this has sparked your curiosity, make sure you don't miss that one. Step number 4 is align with your partner. If you are in a relationship, get on the same page. I've seen too many cases where one partner is ready to push for freedom, but the other's vision pulls them back into the chair. The most successful dentists I work with are couples moving towards the same goal. And here's the kicker. For some dentists, the golden handcuffs don't just restrict freedom, they quietly wear you down emotionally. A study of senior dental students in Tehran found that those people who chose dentistry for altruistic reasons, like wanting to help others, had higher burnout than those motivated by status or financial security. And students who entered the profession because of others, like advice from family, they had much lower burnout. So in other words, if you partly choose dentistry for the economic benefits, you had less chance of burnout. And that's a reminder that our reasons for choosing our career shape not just how we practice, but how we cope with its demands. And for too many of us, those reasons, status, security, validation, they become part of what keeps us locked in. So let's talk about the cost of attachment. I've saved this for last because it's the piece that often stings the most. The more your identity, income, and lifestyle are tied to one role, being the dentist, the more it costs you to change. And I've seen this with dentists who could have afforded to walk away tomorrow, but they don't, because they don't know who they'd be without the role. That's the cost of attachment. And the longer you leave it unexamined, the more expensive it gets: money, time, and opportunity. Because here's the truth. Golden handcuffs aren't just about the money. For many of us, the lock is fastened before we ever earn a dollar. So in a 2007 study by Gallagher, they surveyed final year dental students at King's College in London. It found that professional status was the top reason people chose dentistry. Nearly 1 in 5 male students. That's why they chose it. And that matters because what starts as motivation can quietly become a trap. There's a cognitive bias that they call attachment to identity, which is the tendency to overvalue the roles and labels that define us, even when they no longer serve us. So if being the dentist is core to how you see yourself, that isn't just a financial decision, it's an identity crisis. So let me talk quickly about 4 practical experiments you could try this year. So first, audit your commitments, list every regular outgoing, and actually identify what your true non-negotiables are. What could you drop tomorrow? Secondly, test your exit muscle. Cut back 1 shift a week. What happens to you? What happens to the business over 3 months? Third, reallocate just 10%. Move a slice of your capital into something with better upside. And number 4, add 1 non-dentistry project to your life. Something that has nothing to do with clinical work, a skill or a hobby or an adventure. So golden handcuffs don't feel like a problem when they're shiny and comfortable, but they are still cuffs. And the sooner you see them for what they are, the sooner you can decide. Keep them tight or start looking for the key. In the next episode, we're going to dig into how the ultra-wealthy approach investing. So if you've been listening and you're starting to see how different your path could look, and you'd like to explore maybe what that means for you personally, have a look at what we do in Freedom Warrior. You can check it out on our website, and if it feels like a fit, book a time to have a chat with me. I'll put the link in the notes. See you in the next episode.